J-Man says, I have a question regarding snatch, clean, and jerk start position. Should my shoulder joint be directly above the bar or slightly in front? I would say almost certainly in front of the barbell. Now, there's some scenarios where, depending on your build and your ability to move and your understanding of the lift, being on top of the barbell can be okay. But for pretty much everybody, being in front of the barbell is much more beneficial. So the idea behind your shoulders being in front of the barbell is that even if you start with them on top of the barbell, they need to move in front of the barbell when the barbell leaves the floor. This is for a reason where you're trying to balance you and the barbell. The whole idea of the lift is that you're trying to bring the barbell back to your center of mass, your center of gravity at the hip position, or that kind of power position, as it's sometimes called. And if we have the shoulders on top of the barbell, what can often happen is the shoulders will actually drift back behind the barbell as you move through the first and second pull, unless you're really aware of what you're doing. So when we have the shoulders in front of the barbell, this ensures that you're predisposing yourself to a better position where when you stay with the shoulders in front of the barbell, you have a better time of the barbell coming back towards your hip. But this also makes sure that your hips don't come into the barbell too early. So what can often happen is if the shoulders are too far behind the barbell too soon, we're trying to balance ourselves by bringing the hips in. So when we're at the hip position, we're in a reasonably balanced position. But this is actually an issue because if you bring the hips in too early, you're pushing that barbell further out in front of where it needs to be to express the most amount of power. And when we put the shoulders over in the start, this gives us a nice balance between our back and our legs when we're pulling during the first and second pull. So this ensures then that when you cover the barbell, you can keep your hips further back so you can stay well balanced. And then this ensures that you're giving yourself a better opportunity to end up in the better power position at the hip where you're close to flat footed. Your torso is kind of perpendicular with the floor, and then your knees are underneath the barbell without having to try and put them there.
It's really important at this point to talk about the elite performers you'll see starting with their shoulders on top of the bars. Commonly, you'll see really good athletes who are able to start with their shoulders directly over the barbell, and then immediately upon starting the lift, their shoulders shoot in front of the bar. This is something that people like to do because the feeling of starting with their hips in a lower position feels really good, but almost no beginner to intermediate transitioning into advanced lifter is going to easily be able to develop that motor pattern, and particularly be able to hold on to that motor pattern once the barbell gets heavier and you're trying to move it faster. So what this looks like is our shoulders tilting immediately as you start to pull. If you look at someone like Liu Jun, if you look at someone like Dmitry Klokov, they would have started like this with their hips in a low position. As they start, their shoulders shoot in front of the bar. Loredana Toma is another example of this. This is an incredibly difficult thing to do. You're already doing an incredibly complex lift. You're already having to develop a massive amount of neurological awareness. You're already having to really try and ingrain a motor pattern. It is very different if you've done these lifts since you were a child and you have this really well ingrained motor pattern in your head. Don't try and do the lower hip start position and try and emulate what you see those elite performers doing, because that balance, that coordination, that ability to bring your shoulders in front of the bar and stop them moving forward as the barbell toppling effect is absolutely huge at the end of your first pull, is going to be very, very difficult to do.